The sky darkened long before the storm arrived. At first, it was just a distant rumble, a low growl rolling across the prehistoric landscape like a warning from the earth itself. Early humans, with no modern forecasts or protective structures, had only their instincts to rely on. They read the wind, the smell in the air, and the behavior of animals. When birds vanished into the trees and the wind shifted suddenly, they knew something powerful was coming. A small group of early humans moved quickly across the open land, their eyes scanning for a place to take shelter. The storm clouds gathered thick and heavy, swallowing the sun and casting a cold shadow over everything. Thunder cracked louder now, closer, and the first drops of rain began to fall, slow, heavy, and deliberate. They didn't have time to waste. One of them, more experienced and alert, pointed toward a cluster of large rocks near a forest edge. Natural formations like these often provided the best chance of survival. The group rushed toward it, their bare feet pounding against the uneven ground. The rain picked up, turning the soil slippery and difficult to cross. Wind began to howl, bending trees and carrying debris through the air. Reaching the rocks, they quickly assessed their surroundings. There was a shallow overhang, not deep enough to fully protect them, but enough to block direct rainfall and some of the wind. However, it wouldn't be enough on its own. They needed to improve it, and fast. Using simple tools made from sharpened stones, they cut branches from nearby trees. Others gathered large leaves, thick and wide, capable of shedding water. Working together, they leaned the branches against the rock face, creating a slanted frame. Over this, they layered the leaves, forming a crude but effective roof. The structure wasn't perfect, but it created a barrier against the relentless rain. As the storm intensified, the real test began. The wind slammed against their shelter, trying to tear it apart. Rain poured down in sheets, finding every gap, every weakness. The ground beneath them turned to mud, and water began to pool around their feet. Lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating the landscape in brief, terrifying bursts. Each thunderclap shook the air, sending vibrations through their bodies. But the shelter held. Huddled together, they used their body heat to stay warm. Early humans understood the importance of closeness, not just for comfort, but for survival. The temperature dropped quickly, and without fire, warmth came only from each other. They adjusted their shelter continuously, pressing leaves back into place, reinforcing branches when they shifted. The storm raged for hours. It wasn't just rain, it was a battle against nature itself. Strong gusts threatened to rip the shelter apart, and at times, it seemed like it would collapse. But their quick thinking and cooperation made the difference. They didn't panic. They adapted. At one point, a powerful gust tore part of the leafy covering away, exposing them to the cold rain. Instantly, two members rushed out, despite the danger, grabbing more branches and leaves. Their movements were fast, efficient, driven by necessity. Within minutes, the gap was patched, and they returned to the group, soaked but determined. This is what survival looked like in the prehistoric world, not strength alone, but teamwork, awareness, and resilience. The simple shelter, built from nothing but natural materials and instinctive knowledge, became their lifeline. It didn't block everything. Rain still seeped through in places, and the wind still found ways to chill them. But it reduced the storm's power enough to keep them alive. As the night wore on, the storm began to weaken. The thunder grew distant again, and the rain softened into a steady drizzle. The wind slowed, no longer howling but whispering through the trees. Slowly, the danger passed. The group remained in their shelter for a while longer, cautious and alert. In the wild, danger rarely comes alone. But as the first light of dawn began to break through the clouds, they knew they had survived. Stepping out of their shelter, they saw a transformed world. The ground was soaked, streams had formed where there were none before, and fallen branches littered the land. But they were alive. Their shelter, though damaged, still stood, a testament to their effort and ingenuity. Early humans didn't have advanced technology, but they had something equally powerful, the ability to observe, learn, and adapt. They understood their environment in ways that modern humans often overlook. They knew which materials could repel water, which structures could withstand wind, and how to use the landscape to their advantage. A simple shelter might not seem like much today, but in that moment, it was everything. It meant the difference between life and death. Surviving a storm wasn't just about building something quickly. It required choosing the right location. Low areas could flood, while high ground was exposed to strong winds. Natural barriers like rocks or dense trees provided protection. Every decision mattered. Their shelter worked because it combined all these elements. The rock overhang blocked the worst of the rain. The angled branches deflected wind. The layered leaves created insulation. And most importantly, their constant effort to maintain and improve it kept it functional throughout the storm. This kind of knowledge wasn't written down or taught in classrooms. It was learned through experience, passed down through generations, and refined over time. Each storm survived made them stronger, smarter, and better prepared for the next. But survival wasn't guaranteed. If they had delayed, if they had chosen the wrong location, or if they had failed to work together, the outcome could have been very different. Exposure to cold and wet conditions could quickly lead to exhaustion. Strong winds could cause injury. Flooding could sweep them away. The storm was not just a test of shelter, it was a test of their ability to think under pressure. And they passed. Moments like these shaped human evolution. They forced early humans to develop problem-solving skills, communication, and cooperation. They learned to read nature's signs, to prepare before danger struck, and to never underestimate the environment they lived in. The simple shelter, though temporary, represented one of the earliest forms of human innovation. It was the beginning of architecture, of engineering, of creating safety in an unpredictable world. As the group moved on from their shelter, they carried more than just survival, they carried knowledge. The next time dark clouds gathered and thunder rolled in the distance, they would be ready. Because they had learned that even the simplest shelter, built with urgency and intelligence, could stand against the fury of nature. And in the prehistoric world, that knowledge was the most powerful tool of all. The morning after the storm did not bring comfort, it brought a new kind of challenge. The land, once familiar and predictable, had been reshaped overnight. Pools of muddy water stretched across the ground, small streams carved new paths through the earth, and fallen branches lay scattered like broken bones of the forest. The air was heavy with moisture, and a chilling wind still lingered, reminding the early humans that the storm's grip had not fully released. The group emerged cautiously from their fragile shelter. Their bodies were stiff from the cold, their muscles sore from hours of tension and effort. Hunger began to creep in, sharp and demanding. The storm had not only tested their ability to survive the night, it had also disrupted their access to food and safe movement. One member stepped forward, scanning the environment with focused attention. This was not just a habit, it was survival. Storms often drove animals into hiding, but they could also create opportunity. Small creatures might be stranded, injured, or easier to catch in the aftermath. But danger also increased. Predators, just as desperate, would be searching for the same opportunities. The group knew they couldn't stay where they were for long. Their shelter had served its purpose, but it was temporary and unstable. The ground beneath it was wet and beginning to sink, and the nearby trees, weakened by the storm, could fall at any moment. They needed a better place, something more secure, something that could last longer if another storm came. Moving together, they began their search. The forest ahead looked darker than before. Leaves dripped with water, and the ground was thick with mud, making each step slow and uncertain. Yet, they pressed on, carefully choosing their path. One wrong step could mean slipping, injury, or worse. After some time, they reached a slightly elevated area where the ground felt firmer. Large trees stood here, their roots deep and strong. Among them, they found something promising, a natural dip in the earth, partially surrounded by thick roots and rocks. It offered protection from the wind and a chance to build something more stable. This time, they didn't rush blindly. They had learned from the storm. Two members began testing the ground, ensuring it wouldn't flood if rain returned. Another examined the nearby trees, looking for strong branches that wouldn't easily snap. The rest started gathering materials, but with more purpose now. They chose thicker branches, sturdier leaves, and even vines that could be used to tie parts together. This shelter would be different. Instead of leaning everything against a rock, they built a frame, two forked branches planted firmly into the ground, supporting a horizontal beam. Against this, they layered other branches at an angle, forming a stronger, more balanced structure. The leaves were placed more carefully this time, overlapping tightly to prevent water from seeping through. They even added an extra layer of smaller twigs and grass between the branches and leaves, creating insulation. It was a simple improvement, but it made a big difference. The shelter now had thickness, not just coverage. As they worked, the sky remained uncertain. Dark clouds still drifted above, and distant thunder reminded them that nature could turn again at any moment. But they were no longer reacting, they were preparing. Hours passed, and their new shelter began to take shape. Inside, the ground was lined with dry leaves and grass to keep them off the cold, wet earth. This small detail could mean the difference between rest and sickness. Early humans may not have understood germs, but they understood discomfort, and they avoided it whenever possible. By midday, exhaustion set in. Building required energy, and they had not eaten since before the storm. Hunger could weaken them quickly, making them vulnerable. It was time to divide their efforts. A small group left to search for food, while the others stayed behind to continue reinforcing the shelter. The forest, though damaged, still held life. Birds slowly returned, their calls echoing through the trees. Insects buzzed around damp areas, and small animals began to emerge cautiously. The hunters moved quietly, their senses alert. Near a shallow pool formed by the rain, they spotted movement, small creatures trapped by the sudden change in terrain. With careful coordination, they managed to catch a few. It wasn't much, but it was enough to sustain them for the moment. Back at the shelter, the builders had made further improvements. They had added a second layer to the roof and reinforced the sides with thicker branches. The structure now looked stronger, more capable of withstanding another storm. When the hunters returned, the group gathered inside. They shared the food equally, each taking only what they needed. There was no excess, no waste. Survival depended on balance. As they rested, something changed, not in the environment, but within them. The fear from the storm had begun to fade, replaced by confidence. They had faced a powerful force of nature and endured. More importantly, they had learned from it. The simple shelter from the night before had saved them, but it had also shown them its weaknesses. Now, their new shelter reflected that knowledge. It was stronger, smarter, and more reliable. This is how early humans evolved, not just physically, but mentally. Each challenge forced them to think, to adapt, to improve. Over time, these small changes added up, leading to better tools, better structures, and better chances of survival. As evening approached, the sky began to clear slightly. A faint glow of sunlight broke through the clouds, casting soft light across the forest. It was a rare moment of calm. But they did not let their guard down. One member climbed a nearby rock to get a better view of the surroundings. From there, they could see farther, watch for approaching danger, track movement, and understand the land better. Height meant awareness, and awareness meant survival. Below, the rest of the group made final adjustments to their shelter. They blocked small gaps, secured loose branches, and ensured everything was stable. They worked in silence, each knowing their role without needing instruction. Night would come again, and with it, uncertainty. But this time, they were ready. The wind picked up slightly as darkness fell, but it was nothing like the storm before. Inside their improved shelter, they felt the difference. It held firm, blocking the breeze and keeping the interior relatively dry and warm. They huddled together once more, but this time, there was less fear in their eyes. The storm had tested them, but it had also taught them. And in the prehistoric world, learning was the key to survival. Their journey was far from over. More storms would come, more challenges would arise, and the environment would continue to change in ways they could not predict. But with each experience, they became better equipped to face whatever came next. The simple shelter was no longer just a desperate attempt to survive, it had become a symbol of their growing understanding, their ability to shape the world around them, even in the smallest ways. As the night settled in and the forest grew quiet, the group rested, knowing they had taken another step forward. Not just in surviving the storm, but in becoming something more. The third day began with a strange stillness, the kind that made the forest feel like it was holding its breath. No strong winds, no heavy rain, just a quiet, damp world recovering from chaos. But for the early humans, this calm was not a sign to relax. It was a signal to prepare even further. Survival was never about one storm, it was about the next one that could arrive without warning. Their improved shelter had proven strong through the night, but as the group stepped outside, they began to notice something important. The land around them was still changing. Water from higher ground was slowly draining down toward their area. What had seemed like a safe location yesterday could become dangerous if more rain came. Small streams were forming again, creeping closer to their shelter. One of the older members crouched near the ground, touching the damp soil, studying its texture. It was softer than before. That meant risk. Without needing many words, the group understood. They would have to move again, but this time, they wouldn't just build a shelter to survive a storm. They would build something that could last longer, something smarter. They began searching for higher ground. The journey was not easy. The forest floor was still slippery, and fallen branches created obstacles at every step. Some areas were too exposed, open to strong winds. Others were too dense, where predators could hide easily. Choosing the right place required careful thinking. After a long search, they found it, a slightly elevated ridge, not too high to be dangerous, but high enough to stay dry. Large stones were scattered around, and several thick trees stood firmly rooted, unaffected by the storm. It was a place that offered both protection and stability. This time, their approach was completely different. They didn't rush, they planned. First, they cleared the area. Loose debris, broken branches, and sharp stones were removed to create a safe working space. This alone showed their growing intelligence. Before building, they prepared the land itself. Next came the structure. Instead of a simple lean-to, they began forming a more enclosed shelter. Using strong branches, they created a circular frame, bending flexible wood and anchoring it into the ground. It was not perfect, but it formed a dome-like shape, stronger against wind from all directions. They reinforced the base with stones, placing them carefully around the lower edges to hold everything in place. This added weight and stability, something they had learned was crucial during the storm. Leaves were still used, but now they layered them more strategically, thick on the outside, thinner on the inside. Between layers, they added grass and small twigs, creating insulation that trapped warmth. One of the most important changes was the entrance. Instead of leaving it open, they created a narrow opening facing away from the direction of the wind. This reduced the amount of cold air entering the shelter and helped retain heat inside. It was a simple idea, but it showed a deeper understanding of their environment. As they worked, something remarkable happened. They began communicating more clearly. Not with complex language, but with gestures, sounds, and shared understanding. One pointed, another followed. One adjusted, another reinforced. Their coordination had improved. This was not just building. This was learning together. By midday, the structure was nearly complete. It was stronger, more enclosed, and better designed than anything they had built before. It could withstand wind, resist rain, and keep warmth inside. But survival required more than shelter. They needed fire. The storm had soaked everything, making it difficult to find dry materials. But they searched carefully, looking under rocks, inside hollow logs, and beneath thick tree roots. Eventually, they found small patches of dry fibers, just enough to try. Using friction, they attempted to create heat. It was slow, frustrating work. Hands grew tired, and progress seemed impossible at times. But they didn't give up. Finally, a small spark. It was weak, fragile, almost invisible, but it was enough. Carefully, they fed it with dry grass, blowing gently, protecting it from the wind. The spark grew into a tiny flame, and then, slowly, into a steady fire. Inside the shelter, the fire changed everything. Warmth spread through the space, drying damp skin and easing tired muscles. Light flickered against the walls, pushing back the darkness. The sense of safety increased, and for the first time since the storm, they could truly rest. Fire also meant protection. Predators feared it. Its light and heat created a boundary that many animals would not cross. But even with fire, they remained cautious. As evening approached, distant sounds echoed through the forest, calls of animals, some familiar, others not. The storm had disturbed the balance of the environment, and creatures were moving, searching, adapting just like the humans. One sound stood out, a low, deep growl carried by the wind. The group froze. They had learned to recognize danger quickly. This was no small animal. Something larger was nearby, possibly drawn by the scent of food or the warmth of the fire. Instinct took over. They gathered closer inside the shelter, keeping the fire strong. One member added thicker branches, increasing the flames. Another blocked part of the entrance with additional wood, leaving just enough space to see outside. The growl came again, closer this time. Shadows moved between the trees, barely visible in the fading light. The tension grew, every sense focused, every movement controlled. But the shelter held. The fire burned bright. Minutes felt like hours as they waited, listening, watching. Then, slowly, the sound faded. The creature moved on. Relief spread through the group, but it was quiet, controlled. They understood something important. Danger would always be part of their world. The goal was not to eliminate it, but to be ready for it. Their shelter had done more than protect them from the storm. It had given them a defensive advantage. As night fully settled, they remained inside, the fire glowing steadily. Outside, the forest continued its slow recovery, but inside, something greater was happening. They were changing. Each storm, each challenge, each decision was shaping them into more capable survivors. They were no longer just reacting to nature, they were beginning to understand it, to work with it, to use it. The simple shelter from the first night had evolved into something far more advanced. Not because they had tools or technology, but because they had experience. And experience was power. As the fire crackled and the group slowly drifted into rest, the world outside remained uncertain. More storms could come, new dangers could appear, the land itself could change again. But now, they were different. They had learned how to choose better ground, how to build stronger structures, how to create fire even in difficult conditions, how to protect themselves not just from weather, but from predators. The question was no longer whether early humans could survive a storm with a simple shelter. The answer was clear: yes, they could, but more importantly, they could learn from it, improve, and come back stronger every single time. And that ability, to adapt, to grow, to build from nothing, was what would one day allow them to conquer not just storms, but the entire world. The fourth day did not begin with fear, but with purpose. For the first time since the storm, the group was not simply reacting to danger. They were thinking ahead. Their new shelter stood firm on the ridge, the fire still glowing softly from the night before. Smoke drifted upward in thin lines, disappearing into the morning air. It was a sign, not just of warmth, but of control. They had taken a small step toward mastering their environment. But survival was never still. As the sun slowly rose, its light revealed something unexpected. In the distance, beyond the trees, a wide section of land had been completely transformed. What was once forest had partially collapsed. Uprooted trees lay tangled together, and the ground had opened in places, forming uneven terrain. It was a result of the storm's force, violent, unpredictable, and powerful. To some, it would look like destruction. To them, it looked like opportunity. One of the group members moved toward the edge of the ridge, observing carefully. Fallen trees meant easier access to wood. Broken ground could trap animals. New paths might lead to water sources or safer routes. The storm had reshaped the land, but it had also revealed its secrets. After a brief pause, the group made a decision. They would explore. Not all of them, only a few. The rest would stay behind to protect the shelter and maintain the fire. This division of roles was another sign of growth. They were no longer moving as a single unit all the time. They were beginning to organize. The small exploration group moved down carefully, stepping over broken branches and avoiding unstable ground. Every movement was cautious. The storm might be gone, but its effects were still dangerous. As they reached the damaged area, the scale of change became clearer. Massive tree roots were exposed, some taller than a human. The smell of wet earth filled the air, thick and heavy. Small animals darted between the debris, confused and vulnerable. Then they saw it, a large fallen tree, its trunk hollowed from the inside. The storm had split it open, revealing a dry interior space, protected from rain, hidden from wind. It was not just wood. It was shelter. The group exchanged quick glances. This was something new, a natural structure, already strong, already shaped. It didn't need to be built from scratch, it needed to be used. They approached slowly, checking for danger. A hollow space like this could also hide predators. One of them picked up a long stick and reached inside, testing carefully. No movement, no sound, safe. Inside, the ground was dry. The thick walls of the trunk blocked wind completely, and the opening was small enough to control. It was warmer than outside, even without fire. This discovery changed everything. They quickly returned to the main group, signaling with urgency but not panic. When the others followed and saw the hollow tree, there was a clear shift in energy. This was better than anything they had built so far. But it wasn't perfect. The entrance was narrow, and the inside space was limited. It could not hold all of them comfortably. Also, there was no easy way to control light or heat inside. So they did what they had learned to do best. They improved it. Using branches and leaves, they extended the entrance slightly, creating a small covered area outside the hollow trunk. This acted like a doorway, blocking wind while allowing movement. They lined the inside with dry grass for comfort and insulation. Then came the biggest challenge. Fire inside the shelter. They understood the warmth fire provided, but inside a wooden structure, it was dangerous. Too much flame could destroy everything. So they adapted again. Instead of placing the fire deep inside, they built it just outside the entrance. This allowed heat to flow in while keeping the flames at a safe distance. Smoke drifted away instead of filling the space. It was a simple but powerful idea. As evening approached, the group settled into this new shelter. Some stayed inside the hollow trunk, while others rested in the extended covered area. It wasn't perfect, but it was stronger, safer, and more efficient than anything they had used before. The wind picked up again slightly as night fell, but this time, they barely felt it. Inside the tree, it was calm, warm, protected. For the first time, they experienced something close to comfort, not just survival. Outside, the forest still held danger. Sounds echoed in the darkness, distant calls reminding them that they were not alone. But their confidence had grown. They were no longer just hiding from nature. They were learning how to live within it. As the fire burned steadily near the entrance, its light flickering against the curved wooden walls, the group rested more deeply than before. Their bodies, once tense and alert every moment, began to recover. This rest was important, because survival was not just about enduring, it was about recovering, preparing, and becoming stronger. The storm had forced them to think. The second shelter had taught them to build. The ridge had shown them how to choose wisely. And now, the hollow tree had revealed something even greater. They didn't always have to create shelter. Sometimes, nature had already done it for them. They just needed to recognize it. As the night passed quietly, the group slept with a new sense of awareness. The world around them was still wild, still dangerous, still unpredictable. But it was no longer completely unknown. They were beginning to understand its patterns, its signs, its hidden advantages. And that understanding was changing everything. Because the more they learned, the less they feared, and the less they feared, the stronger they became.